folks hear me? Yeah. Before you couldn't, 'cause the plug wasn't in. But now you should be able to. Okay, well, hello everyone, and welcome to our continuing field trip into the Garden of Eden, to the Gan. And one of the goals here is, aside from the particular details that we are studying, we are trying to get a glimpse to realize what we cannot realize, to glimpse that which we can't. And how do you do that? It sounds like a catch-22. If we even can begin to see what we are not, to understand that our reality, which we refer to as our three-dimensional reality, to flatland, just to even begin to entertain the assumption that there is something more going on here in reality, and that the story of Gan Eden is not a story. We're the story. That's the reality. We are part of that reality that has fallen out, has collapsed. And if anything is a story here, that's us, our reality. The deeper truth is the higher dimensional reality of Gan Eden and the entire story of Bereshit, Genesis, and of the primordial worlds that precede this particular layer. And this is such a radical concept. And I'll be honest with you, I have studied it for decades. And although I had glimpses, and of course anyone that believes in Torah, you believe, of course, in all these events that are being described, but it can often, for one's entire life, remain an abstract idea. You believe it, you don't doubt it, but you don't know what exactly to do with it. To begin to actually see it with a type of extrasensory perception. I assume many of you have seen the Matrix. If not all three of them, saw the first one. And in it, there's this guy, Neo, whose whole life has a sense that there's something wrong, that there's something else, but he can never put his finger on it until the secret of the Matrix is revealed to him. And then it is so shocking, it's so traumatizing, he doesn't believe it, even though he saw it. And this is a very important metaphor for our times, for our generation. We don't have prophecy, but we have fractals, fractured fractions of it. And, things come into this world in strange ways, and the Hollywood production of movies, through all of the klipa that it produces, some of the visual images that we've talked about are very crucial because they become part of our collective mind, of our generation. And the previous generation might have been Gone with the Wind was your metaphor for life, but for us it's the Matrix. So one of the things that we're attempting to do here through this learning process is we are massaging our consciousness. We're bending the limits of our mind. We are pushing ourselves through this Torah learning to the edges of our known consciousness to go where no man has gone before. It's a combination between Star Trek and Mission Impossible. That's the story of the nation of Israel. That's the Torah. Now, we have up on the whiteboard here, that you've seen this before, the descent of the worlds. Just to get a little perspective, flatland perspective, of where we are, and you can't know where we are unless we know where we were, where we're coming from. And without even knowing any Kabbalistic terminology, from this graphic you can get a sense that originally this Adamic figure here is not just a man, but rather this contains all reality. This is representing as the containment of all reality and all consciousness. Before the fall, all reality and consciousness was contained in that small Adamic figure on the left, and the space, those 10 spheres beneath the feet, that was an empty space, and those little spheres are just representing units of higher dimensional space-time. And the gray area of the 14 units, that was the domain of the klipa, of the virus, of the radioactive fallout that was produced and remained as a residue from the primordial reality known as the tohu, the chaos. All reality and the whole story of the Garden of Eden. Remember, there wasn't supposed to be anything else. If Adam would have just kept on his mission, then Adam and his reality that was contained within him. It's interesting, I just realized the obvious. Adam is made out of atoms. That's what the... You see that? No, I knew it. I knew it, of course, the similarity in sound and the concept. But when I looked inside, those sphero looked like the electrons and protons and the nucleus, the kinds you built in 8th grade out of the the Tinker Toys. Right, it looked like a Tinker Toy. It just, and it also could be DNA structure and any of that. Those are very specific. What those are being contained inside of Adam, but his reality was ascending. This left column, and Adam on the top there, it was dynamic. It was not static. It was ascending, literally moment by moment, hour by hour. And you see where the feet are on the left, that one foot hanging out there? Well, in another hour or two, if Adam just would have stayed on track, the foot that's hanging down below there would have been drawn up, and all of that Adamic structure would have ascended even higher, deeper into the Ein Sof in simple terms. Not only did he not ascend higher, but because he ate from the tree of knowledge of good and not so good, then what happened? On the right-hand side, he, with all reality, and he was all reality, his consciousness, everything elongated, and it fell into, not only did he go into the empty space, the 10 units in the middle there, which was like the moat, but a good part of Adam's essence went down into the realm of the Klippa, literally into the domain of the virus itself. And it's one thing that we learned, right? If there's a virus, it can be the most dangerous thing in the world, but if you don't touch it, you can't do anything. If it doesn't have a host to stimulate it, it can't do anything, and very, very importantly, it has no desire to do anything. Evil. True evil has no desire to do evil. That's a radical concept. But it's so logical from a simple Judaic perspective, because if it really had a desire to do evil, in its essence, and if you were to analyze it and dissect it and take it apart, and you found inside there, there it is, and it's crying out, I want to do evil. If there was such a thing, that would mean what? There's another force in the world, something other than God. God forbid. And we know from the model of the virus that it has to be stimulated from the outside. And then it's that stimulation, like you got to apply electric shock to it to wake it up. It's totally dormant. And it has, you know what? Leave me alone. I've been sleeping for 1,000,000 years. I'll just sleep another 1,000,000 years. It has no desire even to wake up until man wakes it up. And then it's too late. Because once you wake it up, immediately you transfer your life force to it. That life force is then what now allows it to duplicate itself right before your eyes. It was just 1, now it's 2. And then it's 4. And then it's 8. Then it's 16. It's 32. And it becomes a geometric progression. And I'm just using this as an example for us to appreciate what happened. So, this is where we are now. Do you see how we are literally embedded? Ask yourself the question, if you dare. Where are we? It's not Kansas. Where are we? This reality. You see how the good essence of Adam is literally commingled, embedded, we're submerged. We're in the wrong place. And that is why the world looks the way it does. Why is, you're trying to, is the world good or is the world evil? Did God make a mistake? Is something wrong? In simple terms, the only thing that's wrong is we're in the wrong place. And that's what the divine said to Adam. You play around with it. The day that you eat from it, meaning that you stimulate it, because what is eating? Uniting with it. You unite with it, guess what? You're going to give it a source of procreation. You're giving it desire. And you're giving it the life force. You're giving it the desire. You're giving it the ability to procreate. And you're giving it the ability to mimic your true self. That is what evil is. But as soon as you take away its life force, as soon as you take away the host, pull out the plug, it's gone. And it never had any independent reality to begin with. This is crucial to understand, because if you're coming from a pagan culture, I don't care how modern it is, but in the back of our minds, due to the Greek influence of a this or that, and whatever Christian influence, this is what we talked about, you believe in Lady Luck, you're also acknowledging the devil. You're acknowledging a joker in the deck. You're acknowledging some other force that is not absolutely under the control of the Creator. All right. We're going to read on now from the text. Once again, we're reading from Rabbi Shlomo Eliashiv, the great Kabbalist in Lithuania, who passed away in about the early 1930s, I believe. And his grandson, by the way, is one of the, in fact, he is the recognized leader of the Lithuanian yeshiva community in Israel to this very day. That is the grandson of this Kabbalist. So we've introduced the phenomenon of the virus to get a little understanding of what Adam was doing, and we read to you last week that on the Peshat level, meaning on the simple flatland perspective, and remember, I should emphasize, even though we're reading from a Kabbalistic text and one of the greatest Kabbalists of the modern period, do not think you're learning Kabbalah. This is not a Kabbalah class. Just get that notion out of your head. What? Because you're learning Torah. You're simply learning, this is the Peshat. The Peshat, the simple narration on a sophisticated level. This is not your Sunday school class. But this is like picking up a book on modern physics for the layperson. Would you ever claim you're studying physics? Okay. Likewise, to study the Kabbalah, it is tantamount to studying physics. We're talking about some grueling classroom material, stuff that can even be, boring until you learn the system, the nomenclature. It's a whole mathematical language unto itself. But what we are doing is, this is, as it were, a layman's presentation of a Kabbalistic perspective of the events that took place in the Garden of Eden. And why did Adam look? Okay, and you have to put yourself in Adam's position. If God told you not to eat from it. And the eating included looking, as we've spent weeks explaining, because there's three kinds of eating, three kinds of knowledge. And included in the prohibition of eating knowing was intellectual knowledge. And again, this was not abstract intellectual. Okay, this was four-dimensional knowing. Why, if you were Adam, and the divine said, don't eat it, even on the level of pure thought, then what are you doing? Looking at it. Why would you do such a thing? Now, we gave you the answer last week. This is a test question. Anybody listening, you can type it in if you know the answer. If you know the answer, once again, I mean, this is not a trick question, and we've already stated it. This is just a peshat. This is a peshat. Adam is commanded not to eat on all three levels, not to know on all three levels. Why is he investigating the cosmic virus? Why is he like bending over? Okay, you're at a zoo. You're at this cosmic zoo. And there's a creature over there that is the most bizarre thing you've ever seen. This multi-dimensional creature. And there's a railing. It keeps you separated from it. Why are you bending over? Touching it! Touching it with your mind! Why are you bending like imagine the light rays of your mind, okay? And you're now extending it out like a laser beam. And you're penetrating through the protective glass barrier, right? Which actually is a moat. There's no way it can touch you.
And it's activated.
And it's dormant. It's dormant. And why are you bending over the mind rays of your thought, and you're poking it? and knowing there's a sign that says beware. This will blow up the entire universe. Everything that God has created up to this point will be destroyed if this entity, this phenomenon, this no man's thing, this no man's land, this indescribable thing that's not alive and it's not dead. Why are you poking it with your thought? We gave you the answer last week. Anybody? We'll give you a prize. Okay.
Isn't there some question as to whether he actually did that?
Not on the pshat. No, it's a real simple answer here, and it's a black and white one. It's nothing philosophical. It's nothing mystical. It's because, I'll read you the words again. Why did he do this? He was doing it. Okay, he was forbidden to eat. Ah, very good. Debbie January wins the prize. And the prize is a petri dish of virus. No. Just don't look too closely. just give us your address and we'll mail it to you. She wrote back, keep it. All right. She is correct. Debbie said that he was forbidden to eat, not to investigate or to look. More specifically, the prohibition. I'll read you the words of the lesson. his entrance into this whole realm in the beginning was l'shem shamayim. That means for the sake of heaven. Because he thought in his mind, since the Holy One only warned him, prohibited him on the eating, okay, which is the knowing, meaning the union, do not unite with it, but there was no prohibition to touch it. Therefore, there was no prohibition, or rather only the tasting, the spiritual tasting of it, which is to become one with it, to unite with it. That's called the eating. You see that? Adam never thought, God forbid, to transgress the eating of it, to unite with it. There was no prohibition to simply touch it, which is to investigate it. But the coming close to it, the investigation, what we would call the looking, it's like look and touch, look, don't eat. Look, don't unite with. And therefore, truly, he did not transgress. Hashem gave Adam the need for knowledge. Well, we're going to see in a moment what that means. See, Adam was actually fulfilling a mitzvah. Remember, we got to put yourself in Adam's position. Not from our perspective. We got to pull ourselves up to like, what could he possibly have been doing? Adam was not a human being. Adam, from our perspective, although this sounds utterly bizarre, Adam was God. If we were to encounter Adam right now, we would not be able to distinguish that phenomenon from our greatest, most profound concept and mystical experience of God. That's what Adam was. He relied upon his wisdom, his great wisdom, that he could touch it, but he would not be pulled after it. But this is where he made his mistake. And when we say mistake, we're just using a simple term, because when you magnify it, it goes and goes and goes. It's not a mistake like, like we make a mistake. This was a profound miscalculation. It's like when something goes wrong, in a rocket ship or something, a spacecraft, and it takes them weeks and months to find out what went wrong that caused this, that caused that, that caused this, and a whole domino effect. This is what we have to appreciate. When Adam started out, not only was it l'shem shamayim, not only was it for the sake of heaven, as we're going to see momentarily, he was actually fulfilling God's will from another perspective. And this is it. This is where we left off last week. Because it says in the Zohar that, in truth, there is no greater, and this is not an exaggeration, there is no greater pleasure to give to the Creator than this act that Adam was engaged in. That if one goes in peace and comes out in peace, that is the greatest mitzvah, the greatest act to be done, because that is the act of the redemption of the captive. As it says in the Zohar, Dahachi it chazeh levarnash leminda tov uleminda ra ulahadra garme letov v'da ihu raza dimehemanuta.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Okay. It is appropriate for a human being to know good and to know evil, and then to return himself to the good. This is the secret of the faith. This is what real faith is about. Raza dimehemanuta. Because this is to intimately know God and the secrets of creation. How there can be anything here other than God. That is what gives God the greatest pleasure. Because that is what the Ein Sof is doing. It's hiding itself from itself so it can know itself and know and know and know. And for Adam to be, as it were, in our simple flatland terms, to be investigating how there can be anything here other than Ein Od, nothing other than itself, that is the greatest pleasure. Because that is the Ein Sof itself. That's investigating its own self, hiding itself from itself, to reveal itself. And who's he revealing it to? Itself. Now go figure that out. Well, that's exactly what Adam was doing. In our real simple primitive terms, that's one way to grasp what we want from this this mental exercise is to get a little glimpse, even just one iota, of the awesomeness of what Adam was doing, and how, on one hand, it's the divine saying, don't. On the other hand, literally, one hand, the right hand of God is saying, don't. The other hand, the backside of God is saying, please. Or you can switch the hands around, because normally it's the left hand that pushes away, that says don't, and it's the right hand that brings close. So talk about double messages. But you see, Adam knew this. He knew a million more times than this. And he relied upon his divine wisdom, which was the mind of God, as it were, that he could investigate, he could touch, he could look without tasting. Talk about on the edge of the edge of the edge of the edge. Okay, we got a note here from Alan and Eileen. Is there traits of Adam in mankind that would make you say, know all that is bad about meth, but you feel that you are on a high enough level that you could try it once and you would know all about it and not be hooked? Only in the most oversimplistic sense. We see, this was not Adam trying to get high. This was not Adam trying to test something out. He wasn't like testing God as the parent. He wasn't just, this wasn't Columbus looking for the new world. It was something much more profound. It was part of the very process of the rectification of the tikkun. Now, if you say that somebody was attempting to find a solution, for the AIDS virus, and then tested something, a drug on himself, for that true altruistic reason, then that would be a closer approximation to get an idea of that which we can't get an idea of what Adam was doing. But this was not simply about, this was not about knowing God for one's own sake. This was not about simply Satori, Nirvana, cosmic consciousness. This was truly to accelerate the redemption process of creation itself. And this was to give God the pleasure, not for his own pleasure. So we have to make that important distinction. Yes. Now, we read to you last week a translation from the Zohar. And then I read to you about the case of Joseph. Guess what? What Adam did, he was not alone. This has been the entire, not just the history in retrospect, after the fact, of the Jewish people. This has been the modus operandi of all the Jewish rabbis and sages from the beginning, going back to Noah. What was Noah doing, getting drunk with the wine?
Checking out the backside.
Checking out the backside. Why? For the fun and pleasure of it. To rectify what Adam already had corrupted. Noah was the genius scientist that was going in to rectify as much as was possible. The virus had gotten in. And the way you get it out is the way it goes in is the way it goes out. How did it come in? Through wine. Yeah? Through wine?
Adam was drinking?
Adam was drinking. That's right. He had skipped his 12-step program.
He has a hangover to this day.
Because the sages tell us what looks like a little, piece of mythology, but it's utterly profound. It said that the tree of knowledge, one of the things that it was wine, was a grape. And what that's alluding to, this was have you ever seen four-dimensional wine? Would you like to taste some four-dimensional wine? Okay.
It was Gevrot.
It was pure Gevrot, exactly. And that's why Noah did what he did with the wine. He was retracing the very steps that Adam had caused, the way the virus got in. He was going into the virus. But he knew how to fix it, but he slipped, like Adam did. Because guess who Noah was?
Adam.
Noah was Adam. How do you spell Noah? A-D-A-M. That is correct.
Sounds like a Rolaids commercial.
That's exactly what was happening. And this was the case with Joseph going down into Egypt. We read that to you last week. That's why when Yaakov heard he was alive, he couldn't believe it. What couldn't he believe? He couldn't believe that Joseph, the master that he was, still he was a human being, that he went down into the original primordial Nachash. He went down into the bowels. You think these lion tamers, they open their head and they put their head inside the lion? Joseph went literally into the serpent, down into its bowels. And not only was he not devoured, not only did he not become one of them, the body snatchers, right? They take over everybody. Not only was he not consumed, absorbed, and become one of them, he was not taken over, but what? He came out with the goods. He literally turned the bowels of the Nachash outside in.
Called it cosmic colonic.
He performed a cosmic colonic on the nation of Egypt. That is correct. And Yaakov couldn't believe it, that he came out. It was successful. He had pulled out, he acquired all the occult knowledge of Egypt, which, by the way, is the basis of all science and technology. Think it comes from the Greeks? Do your history. The Greeks got it all from ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt is the root of all Western occultism, which is the root of all Western science and technology. And this was, in fact, what King Solomon was doing. Why did King Solomon marry 1,000 women. Well, actually, only 300 were wives. The other 700 were concubines. What was he doing? Once again, put yourself in his position. Don't bring Solomon down to your level. You go up to his level. If you have total cosmic consciousness and you're a master guru and a Talmudist and a scientist, why would you be doing such a thing? We're not going to go into the details now, but he had the blueprints that Joseph had. And Joseph had the blueprints that Noah had and that Adam had. They all got the same maps. King Solomon is making the tikkun, attempting to make the tikkun to rectify it. And guess what? Spaceship Earth was all set to go. That was the temple. That's what that structure, that edifice was. And Solomon was it was just the finishing touches. It's all was needed, and he just needed the fuel to power it. Where was that fuel coming from? The Gevurot of the women. He was channeling all that energy. Now that's a man. That's a Torah warrior. And he, in that sense, was Adam incarnate, that fractal of Adam, and he was going to make the final tikkun. And the truth is, all reality would have been finished as we know it in the time, and because King Solomon was 15 generations. And it was all systems all go, but guess what? He slipped at the last minute, and this. You ask me, wait a second. I see a pattern here. Slip after slip after slip. What's going on here? Okay. This is because ultimately it's the will of Hashem. But more specifically, the lesson points out there's a difference. When King Solomon went in, he failed. Ultimately, Adam went in, he failed. Others went in, also failed, and this includes, for example, Nadab and Abihu. What were they doing messing around with the strange fire? Why were they apparently drinking at the time? Because they were repeating, doing the same tikkun. These were boy geniuses, and they were spiritual masters. They failed, but others, like Joseph, who went in, they were successful in whatever was their mission. Why? Because they were commanded to go. That's the difference. Adam was not commanded. He took it on his own. King Solomon was not commanded. King David. The whole story with Bathsheba, King David was not a human like we were humans. This was not about lust. He was a tantric master. He had absolute total control of his desires. This was a conscious decision that he made, and it was part of the tikkun. Because he was Adam, and guess who she was? That was a fractal of Chava. He's making the tikkun. But because he wasn't commanded to go, so ultimately there was an element of failure. Now, who was commanded to go? Here's another. This will explain a strange phenomenon. Hosea, the prophet. You know the story of Hosea? You really want to get blown out? If you don't know it, in the book of Hosea, one of the 12 minor prophets, right? The Holy One says to this holy prophet, this holy man, a saint, tzaddik, he says, Kach lacha eshes zenunim, the Yaldei zenunim. He commands the holy prophet to marry a prostitute, a street walker. Why? Because now there's a machloket amongst the commentaries whether this was a metaphor, this was real, whatever. But you see, for our purposes, it's moot. And for the Kabbalist, the Peshat is the Peshat. It literally was. But why? This is bizarre. because he was commanded to enter into the other side. Because in that generation, the nation of Israel was afflicted with a virus of Avodah Zorah. And Hosea, who's the cosmic surgeon, is commanded to go in and to operate. What do you operate on? The very stuff itself. You need a micro, you need like a specimen of the very evil that's afflicting the whole nation. And that specimen was in the medium of the prostitute. And he had children from the prostitute. And this was part of the rectification. But he was commanded to do so, and therefore he was successful, and he made the tikkun for that generation. He saved the generation of Israel at that time, Hosea the prophet, through what? In the words of the Zohar, knowing good, knowing evil, and bringing yourself back to the good. Because he went in to the virus, as it were, and he disengaged it. He pulled out the plug from the host. And you can't do that if you don't put your hands on the plug. Meaning you got to get your hands dirty. You must go into the dirt, into the filth. But if you're not commanded, you will not have God's protection. And then you're only relying upon your own great wisdom. And as profound as it was, and who had greater wisdom than King Solomon? Guess what? King Solomon, in one sense, and we're not going to get there tonight, but for next week, I'll read you. He had, in one sense, achieved higher wisdom than Adam. That was King Solomon. Yeah, it's not a real true comparison. Remember, Adam is a higher dimensional consciousness reality, and King Solomon was in the form of a Homo sapien as we are now after the fall. But there was, in one aspect, he had achieved something that even Adam did not have. What it was, we'll see. We'll see next week. Stay tuned. And this is what we read to you last week.
What were the others that were commanded? You were going to give us.
Well, the patriarchs, when Abraham was told to go down to Egypt. Remember, if there are natural phenomena that force you to do something, that's God. If there's a famine and you've got to go, okay, that's God commanding. So when the patriarchs, they were all successful. Everyone's doing their tikkun on their level. Everyone, they're all going into the pardes. They're all going into the orchard of the other side. Because the other side is what? It's simply the other side. Because there's only one side. There's one surface with two sides. That's the Mobius strip model. And then, guess who also was commanded?
Job. Rabbi Akiva.
Well, that's yes. Then that was much later. Actually, the truth is no. The Rabbi Akiva and the four sages were not commanded, and that's why ultimately they were not successful. And the proof is that one went crazy, one became a heretic, one died, and Rabbi Akiva was tortured to death because they were not successful. They figured out a plan how to jumpstart, to return the creation, to make the final tikkun, but they did it based upon their own wisdom. Now, their own wisdom, these were geniuses like, this was a combination of Einstein, Marx, and Freud. And Big Blue, the computer. But still, if you don't have that element of the divine protection, and this is Moses, the burning bush, why is he so freaked out? When he throws down his staff and turns into a snake. And he's traumatized. Give me a break. Because he was being commanded by God to go into the other side. And Moses knew you can't go. He knew what happened to Adam and to Noah. And to all the masters before him. And he knew there was no way. But the difference was, and this is in Parshas Bo, we read several weeks ago, God says, come. And the Zohar asks the rhetorical question, why is God saying come? It should say go. Go to Pharaoh. Why does it say come to Pharaoh? Because God's on the inside telling Moses, come in. I'm here and I will protect you. Who was commanded to go in? You'll never guess. The entire Dor HaMidbar, the generation of the desert, the Jews in the wilderness for 40 years. They were commanded, drawn, literally pulled straight into the entire realm of the other side. The desert, you think that was the desert? They weren't in the physical plane. You know what deserts are? You know why it looks the way it looks? Because that's the physical habitat for the four-dimensional reality of the other side. And they were screaming, no, no, we don't want to go. No, no, we won't go. No, no. Yeah, that's what they were doing. And God said, sorry, we're on a mission here. And you don't get to choose. I need to clean this place out. We need to do every place that they went, every encampment. They weren't just freaking out and losing it. The place itself. God said, guess what, guys? I got 42 black holes that they need some housekeeping. 42 places. That's the backside of the holy name of 42. This was literally, this was the remnants, the fallout left from the time of Adam that had been caused. And he's now sending the nation of Israel, Moses and the nation of Israel, on as a cleanup crew. And every time they got to a place, it was the place itself that caused them to falter and to fall. And then finally, clean it out. The damage is done. You know, there's been X amount of death and destruction, and all right, thank God. You know, we got that done. And God says, guess what, guys? Pick up. That's why it says about the ark. It was commanded by God's word. God said, take it up and put it together, and let's move. The tabernacle, right? And God said, all right, here it is. Lay it down. Dig in. And they went through a whole nother traumatic experience. Fighting a black hole? And they said, all right, we're done. And God says, sorry, guys, we got another one. 42 times over 40 years. And so they were brought into the desert in order to destroy the backbone of the primordial serpent from the time of the fall of Adam. And it was rough going. And that's why all the names of the places, look at the names of these places every time. One place was called Burden and Quarrel. Another place was called Lust. Another place was called the Graveyard of Desire. Because it was the place itself that caused that whole matter there. So don't look at these guys. What fools, they're complaining. They want the onions of Egypt and there's not enough water. This is all code language. Let's see how well you do next time you're sucked into a black hole. And the truth is, they were all brought to these places against their will. They didn't want to do it at all. But they were brought in because each time it was a nisayon. Now, the word nisayon means test, but it also means an experiment. See? Each was like they were being forced to experiment. It was a laboratory to burn out the virus. But the thing had become so encased, so embedded in reality. It's 26 generations now from the time of Adam. It's dug in deep. And Egypt was just, the big part of it. This was like the cleanup crew, right? They killed the big monster, but he's got lots of little monsters, little babies, right? That you have to now take them and bash them, their brains against the rock to get it out. Kedei lachalchish kol achasitra acharav. But it was Hashem who was with them the whole time, as it says, Hashem holech lifnehem. that Yud Hey Vav Hey will go before them the whole time. They were being led. And they did not want to go. And this is a famous Zohar that says they were at the Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea, and they were in a state of total ecstasy. Seeing they're literally in the next world. They didn't want to move. So what did God do? He took the very vision that they were experiencing and he put it out in the desert, like baiting them. That he did in order to get them to go out in that direction. And this is what, as we said also with King Solomon, we'll go into a little more detail about that next week. And all of this is really just to give us more examples of what, and these are just little fractured fractions of what Adam was doing. But you see, this has been the entire modus operandi of the nation of Israel from the beginning to the end, because the nation of Israel is Adam. It looks different, different names, but it's the same essence. It's virtually Adam incarnate. And this is what Adam was doing, because this is the greatest mitzvah that can be done, the greatest elevation of God, and gives the greatest pleasure to the divine. Do we have any questions? All right. Then we will conclude this evening. Thank you for joining us. And you have plenty to think about. And I hope it's cause for some good dreams. All right, folks. Laila Tov. See you next week.